Welcome to the Foul Play YouTube channel.
Hey, welcome everyone. Welcome to Coffee with Foul Play. My name is Dr. Silkman. Welcome, beautiful people, and thank you for coming on and listening to our podcast. We appreciate that very much. And guys, today what we're going to be doing, we have actually finished the MaM 2 season. And what we're going to do is we're going to do a review of season 2. Much like we did with season 1. So if you're relatively new to the case or you want to have a refresher and basically you want to find out what the major points were in season 2, this podcast is for you. And guys, we've done 10 MaM 2 podcasts together as a team, and collectively we've had over 11,000 views for our podcast, and that's incredible, guys. And we thank you very much for joining us, for supporting us, for asking a lot of questions, and it's really just been awesome. If you like what we do, guys, please subscribe to our channel and give us a thumbs up. If you give us a thumbs down, that's fine as well, but please let us know where we can improve. We try and read all the questions and try and answer the questions during the podcast, and we try our very best. Now, joining me today on our podcast, we have the regular researchers. We have BB, Big Jeff, Hanzo, Jack61, and Neverly. And on chat, monitoring the chat on YouTube, fielding your questions, we have Catnit, Linda Kay, Sammy, and Zoe. So guys, if you have any burning questions, write them down, and after the podcast proper, we'll try our very best to answer them. Now, of course, on our YouTube channel, if you just go to the description, you'll find that we are on social media. We have a website. We do a variety of podcasts. We have the Powder Puff team. We have the case readings, which are being done at the moment. So we have a variety of different social media and a variety of content for not only these two cases, but for wrongful convictions. Now, guys, before we start the podcast proper, oh my God, what a week it has been. And, you know, I just want to talk a few minutes and open up to the panel. Most of the panel, of course, are from the United States. And you'll be living under a rock to realize what's been happening all around America with the rioting and protesting. And it's been very scary, of course. And I'm from Australia, so I'm from a distance. But most of our panel are from America, and it'll be interesting to get their viewpoint about what's happening. And of course, we also had the reply from the state to Kathleen Zellner's filing, and I must admit it has been very, very brutal, the response. So guys, before we start the podcast proper, I'm just going to open it up to the panel, and guys, what a week. Tell me about it. What's happening, guys? Jack61.
It's not been too close to where I'm at it until recently in Grand Rapids. That's about 45 minutes or so away from me. So
Right.
in my area, it's really not it's not too bad. Of course, a lot of people that are heated and upset, and rightfully so, because the actions of the police are a direct representative of our, they're our first line defenders.
Yes.
Of the public safety. And when you see a video such as we saw with not Flynn, Floyd, it
Yes.
I don't want to protect or shield my children from anyone, but I really didn't want them to watch it. It's terrible.
That was very bad.
It was graphic. It was brutal. To me, they killed the guy straight up, right in front of everyone.
Yes.
So it was kind of an in-your-face thing and saying, I can do it, and there's really not a damn thing you can do to stop us. and
Yes.
they sent a message that it went right to the heart of a lot of people, and it still is right now.
Yes.
So
Oh,
uh,
yes.
a lot of
Yes.
heat.
Yes. Yes. It's like I said, I'm watching it afar, and a lot of live broadcasts. I'm just horrified. It's a very bad situation. Sammy, do you have a comment?
Yeah, we watched a police officer take the life of another human being. Just the way I see it, he's a human being.
Yes.
It's the outrage and anger is causing certain race to just feel so, not heard, they're not heard. And I
Yes.
want them to remember that we all do care. We are all human beings, and I acknowledge the fact that they took the life of a human being. So I understand they have to realize what they're doing is so it's counterproductive to what message we need to be sending.
Yes. Yeah. It's horrific. Bibi, do you have a comment?
Yeah, I'd just like to mention that even the Amish, or the Mennonites or whichever, even came out and protested along with everybody in the cities, and that's unheard of because normally they wouldn't even know what went on because they do not watch television, listen to radios or anything else,
Yes.
but even they're aware of what happened, and even they came out with signs and sung hymns and
Never
protested
seen.
with the people.
I've never seen it before, BB,
It's
ever.
unheard of.
Me
It's
neither, and I have been
unprecedented and
around.
unheard of.
Yep.
Yes. They don't normally get involved and mix in our stuff, and this time they are taking a stand too with everyone.
Yes. Yes. Yeah, I mean, like I said, for me, being in Australia, we're not really used to seeing things like that. We saw rioting in the days of Vietnam, and that was pretty bad. I mean, I was only a small child then, but to see what's happening in the streets of America everywhere, and a blatant disregard for police, ambulance drivers, first responders being pelted with bricks and rocks. It's a terrible thing. Big Jeff, do you have a comment?
I do, and my heart also goes out, and I echo the concerns of the panel that what we witnessed was despicable. Also
Yes,
despicable is the reaction of the Rent a Riot organizations
yes,
who've taken
yes,
away from the peaceful protests that need to be heard, and their actions, burning and looting, are completely unacceptable in a civilized society. And I personally pray for peace and hope
yes,
everyone will join me in condemning the illegal, unnecessary, unthoughtful, and destructive actions of these organizations.
Ah, I do.
yes, yes. What is amazing is just the brutal attack on the police, their vehicles, and yeah, you're right. It was rent a crowd, okay, and they came for a purpose, and just a lot of destruction and burning of buildings, and yeah, it really is a terrible, terrible thing. I also listened to some podcasts from African American leaders in America, and they were saying that this is pent up aggression from a long, long time, and it was just like the powder keg. That was the last straw that ignited this, and yeah, it was horrific. Um, Neverly, what's happening in your neck of the woods?
I live in Orange County, and there were some peaceful protests very close by my house, and that's fine. There were just people, walking around in this like plaza. It has a
Yes,
circular, yeah. So they were just walking and everything's fine. However, the city next to it, which is Santa Ana, it's heavily populated by Hispanics, and they joined into the not so peaceful protests, and there was a lot of police actions over there. However, there's nothing was burning and stuff. However, an hour away from me, which is Los Angeles, yeah, there we have big problems over there. And the funny thing is that I was just there like the day before, and everything was fine. And
Oh, right.
yeah, so the very next day, I couldn't believe my eyes. Everywhere I went, there's riots, and there's looting of the stores, especially Target store. There's a whole
Yes.
this plaza with like little liquor stores, mom and pop shows, nail places. I mean, we've seen this before. The biggest riot we had was back with Rodney King, and
Rodney
LAPD
King.
was not ready. And I think
Right.
also they're like possibly, this is just speculation, they're possibly egging on the police to see what they're going to do if they're ready this time or not, because that was the
Right.
biggest fiasco at the time.
Yes. Yeah, it certainly was very, very shocking. Guys, does anyone have any other comments about what's happening in America? A Big Jeff.
If I could just make one more.
Of course. Of course.
I don't know a single person, or not even aware of one single person, who stood up in favor of what this white officer did to this black victim. Not one single person.
Yes.
This was an opportunity, because when you have this level of indignation, it's an opportunity for people to come together. And let's not turn this into an opportunity squandered.
Yes.
And that will happen if the riots continue. Because people are afraid. They're gonna demand the police respond. Take it down a notch. Let's have the opportunity to come together, because together we all can achieve more.
Yep, all of humanity.
Correct.
Yes, for a human being.
There was one governor, I can't remember the state, but he did come out in defense of the cops. And
Mississippi.
He said
I was
that
just going to say that.
if you say, I can't breathe, that means that you can breathe. Let me tell you, I have severe asthma, and no, it doesn't. Okay, because sometimes I can get out the words, I can't breathe, when I can't breathe.
So what are you supposed to do if you can't breathe?
I don't know.
I don't know.
They're
What was his point?
basically saying
It would
you
probably
can
be the
talk.
choky sign, but if your hands are handcuffed behind your back and people are kneeling on you, you can't do that either.
I think they were being a smartass saying if you can talk, you can obviously be breathing. And it's just that was
Well, it's
wrong.
kind of ignorant, and
it was not good. Was not good.
Yeah,
All
Cheryl
right, guys.
Infantillo from the chat says that this is a civil war.
Yeah, well, looks like it.
I believe it may be the start of it that we're seeing. Yes.
If we acknowledge it and encourage it, it will turn into that. But we have to pray, and we have to do everything we can to strive for the restoration of a civilized society. By acknowledging by acknowledging the horrificness of the deed, and by condemning the things that are being done, so-called in the name of this horrific deed, because those are equally as bad.
Well,
and the next step is to make proper changes that need to be made and do it now.
And
Don't
also,
wait.
the other 3 officers need to be brought in on charges.
Yes.
They should have brought them in right away. I think it would have squashed this if they would have arrested them all days sooner,
Correct. Oh boy. Well, look, guys, I know we can talk for another several hours on this. It's pretty horrific. Hanzo, do you have any comments at all from your perspective?
Kind of alarming that a normal officer on duty can arrest someone for just walking on the street, while this officer, it took 3 to 4 days to arrest him. Just based on the first video that was released, it's enough evidence to arrest him and conduct a investigation.
Yes, correct. All right. Well, just to continue the angst, of course, we had the response by the state for the filing that Kathleen Zellner put in. Now, I must admit, I haven't read every word in it. I'm glad that the Foul Play team are doing an excellent job by reading it out, and I'm following it in that regard. But to me, looked very, very brutal, and they attacked absolutely everything. So, guys, does anyone want to make any comments about the filing? A Big Jeff.
Oh man, this could drag us on. I'll try and be brief though. I'd also like to acknowledge some of the other excellent stuff that's been going on with regard to the filing. Travis Williamson has been doing a wonderful job making the rounds.
Yes.
Did an excellent podcast yesterday with Fen. I
Yes.
encourage everybody to listen to that. He was on with myself and Millbilly the night before. We did some readings as well, and he spent an hour of his time reacting. So thank you, Travis, for all that you're doing, because what we need most right now is lawyers to really explain to us what the heck is going on. My personal opinion
is that?
I stand with Jerry Buting in saying that the state again did not address the merits of Zellner's filing. They addressed the method. They invoked procedural bar. They invoked underpleading of the argument. They did not invoke, in many ways, sort of the merits of her findings, especially the constitutional one, which I happen to think are Zellner's best things: the VLECB and the boats. So I look forward to Zellner's reply, and
we all do.
It's in the hands. But I encourage everybody, listen to that last hour of the podcast I did with Millbilly a couple nights ago. Listen to the Travis's podcast. The procedural bar arguments are very important for us to understand.
Yes. Yes.
And listen to Dr. Silkman's podcast. He did an excellent job breaking it down. I think you really did an excellent job on that, Dr. Silkman, and it really ought to be the MO for people moving forward to pick a topic and do that topic in depth.
Correct.
And, rather than trying to do the whole thing at once, because
it's just about impossible.
There's not enough time for one thing in the world. But
no, there's not.
You need the right expertise on the right topic. So well done in that podcast. And
thank you.
I hope people embrace it as the gold standard for moving forward.
It's almost had 500 views in one day. So it's, I think, making an impact, which is really, really pleasing. But, yes, please, guys who are listening, check out Millbilly's podcast. And there are several other podcasts where people have done readings. The more information you have, the better that you're, armed to understand what's going on. Guys, do we have any other comments about the filings? Jack61, did you have a comment?
I think that.
Yep.
Yeah, I think that I agree with Big Jeff, and I stand with Buting as well. It's going to come down to because the state just ignored so much stuff and just went on the attack on the procedural thing. That's what I see.
Correct. Yes. Sorry, Jeff. Sorry,
that's okay.
Jack.
It's going to be interesting to see how she responds to that, because I think that she's probably, well, I hate to put words in her mouth, but I think that she will go right after exactly what they've tried to do, and just basically they just are saying everything you got is not allowed, should have never been allowed. Procedurally, you should have been barred years ago. We shouldn't even be here. That's what I get out of it. So it was a vicious attack on her and her experts, as you said last night.
Oh, correct. It's I've never seen an attack like that on professional people. It basically, the way I saw it was they took her filing, went to the top of it, drew a line, and ignored everything underneath the line. That's it. Just ignored it. Bibi, do you have a comment?
We're also doing a 3-part on the reading on Powder Puff. That will come out on Tuesday, the first one.
Yes. Awesome. Big Jeff, did you have a comment?
Yeah, it's just following on to what Jack said, which I firmly 100%, 1000% agree with. I just wanted to say that some of this procedural bar originates from Stephen's 2013 pro se filing. And since Stephen didn't argue it in the pro se filing, you can't pick it up in the middle, so therefore it's procedurally barred. But I think there's
Yes.
part of the law that says, unless there's a very good reason.
Yeah.
So I think
Correct.
what we'll see Zelda argue is part of that good reason why, some of these things that she said exceeds the procedural bar.
Yes.
The state does make some good points, though. The state does make some good points. The jury did hear this evidence. The jury did hear the planting evidence, yet they decided otherwise.
Correct.
So she does have quite a bar. They did an excellent job, framing Stephen, and Dean and Jerry did almost too good of a job in the defense from the perspective of what Stephen's trying to do now. So.
Yes.
I'm really hoping that the constitutional violations of the VLECD and the bones, I was going to put it back over the top, because there are some valid arguments that the state does have in that response. But they did tip the scales when they started to talk about that, when they went after the experts. I thought that was quite unprofessional.
Oh, absolutely. Thank you, Big Jeff. Bibi.
Once again, this shows where the police department needs to follow the letter of the law.
Correct.
Everywhere, every police department involving everything.
I agree with you, Bibi. Big Jeff, do you have a comment?
Well, one more thing that I forgot to mention was we can see that the apple hasn't fallen too far from the tree, right? Mm-hmm. Circling all the way back to our very first podcast that we did on MaM, and one of our very first readings that we ever did on the Foul Play YouTube channel.
Yes.
We talked about the 1985 case.
Yes.
And much of this stems from Attorney General Peg Lautenschlager whitewashing the 1985 thing.
And now it's her son.
And now it's her son. The apple has not fallen too far from the tree, has an attorney general call, as you continue to whitewash the corruption of Manitowoc County. I just have to reach out, and I know you're not listening, but maybe someone is listening. I wonder how your mother felt about doing it. Was this her finest hour when she covered up that corruption? And was this probably the most despicable thing that she ever had to do in her whole life? How do you feel about having to follow in your mother's footsteps and covering up the corruption in Wisconsin? If you'd please answer that question, I'd surely appreciate it. Thank you. We should all tweet that. Let's all tweet the apple hashtag the apple hasn't fallen too far from the tree.
Big Jeff, there's a black van outside my door with some Secret Service men. Keep your vitriol down, Big Jeff. They'll be taking me away.
I probably know them, so just invoke my name and they'll be okay.
All right, guys. Do we have any final comments? Otherwise, I can make a start on the podcast proper. We're all good? And, of course, we can discuss this later on, and we can discuss this in our Discord channel. But thank you very much, team. I really appreciate that. And so what we'll do, we'll make a start with the podcast proper. Now, I just want to warn listeners, it's a little bit longer than usual because it is a review of 10 episodes. Not all the slides will take long to go because you've seen most of these before. But I just want to give an overview of all the excellent work that Kathleen Zellner did. All right, guys, so we'll make a start. Let's have a look at slide number 1. So this is a review of Making a Murderer Season 2, looking at our Foul Play podcast, of which we've done 10. Now, what we did initially, right at the start, we subdivided the podcast into looking initially at Stephen Avery only. Later on, what we're going to do is come back and we're going to have a look at Brendan Dassey. So really, this is looking at Stephen Avery and what Kathleen Zellner has done in terms of looking at the forensic evidence. Now, we know that at the time, Stephen, he had been in prison for 28 years. He was 53 years old at the time. And he's been sentenced to life prison. And of course, what we're really trying to do here throughout the series is we want to ask the question, because all of us here believe that Stephen Avery and Brendan Dassey are innocent. neither of them were involved in the murder of Teresa Halbach. And so we wanted to ask a very simple but important question, and that is, who was responsible for the murder of Teresa Halbach? So guys, if we have a look at slide number 2, now we know the history of how this occurred, but Kathleen Zellner now is Stephen's post-conviction lawyer, and she's a very heavy hitter in this type of industry and game. And Kathleen Zellner went up to Stephen and basically laid it out for him. She said, you would have to be an idiot to hire me, because Kathleen Zellner, as we all know, guys, is extremely efficient. She's a bulldog. She gets right down nitty gritty. And she told Stephen, look, if my experts look at the forensic evidence and find you guilty, I will announce it. I have no at all. And Stephen turned around and said, do whatever you do, test what I am innocent. So Kathleen Zellner's approach was very, very simple. What she wanted to do is to unpack the state's case against Stephen Avery. And what she wanted to do is to attack the forensic evidence. So guys, let's have a look at slide number 3. Now, just to show you how serious Kathleen Zellner is in the pursuit of the truth to discover what happened to Teresa Halbach, she actually purchased a very similar Toyota RAV4. And as you can see in the diagram on the right-hand side, Teresa Halbach owned a Toyota RAV4, a 1999 model. And the reason why Kathleen Zellner wanted to buy a similar vehicle, and I quote, so much of the evidence was concerned with the car. So she did the right thing and she purchased a Toyota RAV4. If we have a look at slide number 4, well, what Kathleen Zellner initially did was that she hired experts in the field of blood. She hired Stuart James, who's a bloodstain pattern analysis, and Dr. Larry Bloom, who's a forensic pathologist. And what they wanted to do is to examine the blood evidence. Now, we know that the Toyota RAV4 contains blood from Teresa Halbach in one part of the vehicle, and it also contains 6 drops of blood and flakes, blood flakes, in the front of the Toyota RAV4 that allegedly belonged to Stephen Avery. So both Stuart James and Dr. Larry Bloom, they basically went over the blood evidence. So if we have a look at slide number 5, well, the blood spatter expert was able to reproduce every stain of blood in the Toyota RAV4, and they did so very, very easily. They were able to produce blood flakes and place them within the car very easily. They were able to smear blood on the CD case. They were able to reproduce the stain pattern mark on the ignition where the ignition key is, and by using a dropper, they were able to reproduce the blood stain on the metal frame of the Toyota RAV4. So all in all, it was very, very easy to set up using a dropper and also an applicator. So it was very straightforward to reproduce what had happened in the Toyota RAV4. But there's one important thing, and that is you don't find a mixture of bloods. You have allegedly Teresa Halbach's blood in the back, and you have Stephen Avery's blood at the front. And the state, remember, alleged that Stephen Avery had an actively bleeding finger, but it was very suspicious the way the blood was distributed throughout the Toyota RAV4. So if we have a look at slide number 6, the experts also showed something very, very important. If we have a look on the right-hand side, the top picture, we can see the blood. This is a reproduction of the blood droplets on the back door. And so in the trial, the blood spatter expert for the state said, oh yeah, that those drops of blood on the back door was because Stephen Avery and Brendan Dassey picked up Teresa Halbach and swung her in the back of her Toyota RAV4. And so what the experts tried to do is to reproduce it using a dummy, a mannequin with blood in their hair, in the mannequin's hair. And they showed that if you flung the so-called mannequin into the back, the blood went in a specific direction to the direction of where the mannequin was being flung. That was not what's found on the back door. Basically, the blood had hit at 90 degrees and you had small round droplets. Clearly, that was not due to Teresa Halbach being flung in the back of her car. The other important thing was the blood distribution pattern on the back door wasn't due to being shot in the head, because when someone is shot, the blood, the forward and back spatter that occurs is a very fine mist pattern. So that wasn't due to a gunshot wound. What the investigators found was that if they simulated someone being struck in the head with a heavy object, like a hammer, and the hammer is flung back, it reproduced the pattern on the back of the door. So it appeared that Teresa Halbach, or the victim, if you don't believe it was Teresa Halbach, was struck in the head with a heavy object, a heavy metal object, like a hammer. So let's have a look at slide number 7. So a big aspect of this case, and really what got me interested personally, is that a lot of the forensic evidence involves DNA. So what Kathleen Zellner did was she consulted with a forensic DNA expert by the name of Dr. Carl Reich, and he's from Independent Forensics. Kathleen Zellner asked Carl Reich, go over the case and find anomalies. And Dr. Carl Reich, he replied, yeah, there is more than a handful of those. So if we have a look at slide number 8, both Kathleen Zellner and Carl Reich, they went to the Wisconsin State Crime Lab and they obtained various items of evidence. Two of the most important items of evidence and very controversial pieces of evidence was item ID, which was the swab from the hood latch of the Toyota RAV4, and item C, which was the Toyota RAV4 key itself. So let's have a look at slide number 9. Well, the hood latch was actually swabbed many months later. That's known as item ID, and Cherie Cohane was able to extract a robust, full genomic DNA profile of only Stephen Avery. So it was a pure sample that was present on the hood latch swab. So if we have a look at slide number 10, this is where the controversy takes place. So what Kathleen Zellner did with her expert is that she got volunteers to touch a replica hood latch, and a DNA extraction was done every time the person touched the hood latch. And what was discovered was that only 4 out of 15 samples actually produced any DNA at all. But take note, the amount of DNA that was obtained was extremely low. It averaged 0.072 nanograms. That's a tiny amount of DNA. Yet, have a look at what the Cherie Cohane obtained from the hood latch swab, a huge amount of DNA. In fact, almost a 26-fold higher amount than test subjects, right? So that's really bizarre for a start, but it's actually worse than that. The hood latch sample was taken about 150 days after the Toyota RAV4 was discovered. Now, we know that DNA breaks down, and it breaks down over time. So therefore, because 150 days had gone by, that value probably could be double or triple the normal amount that you would expect. So is that suspicious? That is very, very suspicious. All right. Now, if we have a look at slide number 11, well, of course, one of the most controversial forensic pieces of evidence was the Toyota RAV4 key. Now, we know that the RAV4 key was found in Stephen Avery's bedroom after Colburn decided to do the hippie shake on the bedroom cabinet, and the key just magically popped out of thin air. So, the bizarre thing about the key was that no blood was noted on the key. Cherie Cohane did a swab of the black portion of the key, and lo and behold, she got a full, robust profile belonging to Stephen Avery. Now, no DNA was found from anyone else, including the owner, Teresa Horbach. And what makes this very, very suspicious? First of all, there is no mixture of DNA on that key. But secondly, Cherie Cohane used the entire swab. So no one can go back and retest the key for DNA. She used up the entire sample. All right. So if we have a look at slide number 12, now this is where it gets really weird. Cherie Cohane was able to extract DNA from the key, and the concentration of that DNA was 0.17 nanograms per microliter. That's a very small amount. However, what Kathleen Zellner did was that she took an exemplar key to the jail where Stephen was staying, and Stephen held the key for 12 minutes. So in other words, like touch DNA. He held the key for 12 minutes. Then the DNA was extracted from the key, same region. Lo and behold, the DNA, the amount of DNA that was isolated from that key was 10-fold less. So note, both the hood latch and also the key had much higher DNA levels than one would expect. All right, so let's have a look at slide number 13. Well, we know that the victim was shot at least twice in the head, one in the parietal region, which is near your left temple, and one in the back of the head near the occipital region. We know that cranial bone fragments were recovered, and both of those cranial bone fragments had beveling. That's indication of a high velocity bullet going into the skull. And Dr. Jeffrey Jensen said, look, the cause of death was gunshot wounds to the head. And of course, we all know about the controversy involving item FL. So if we have a look at slide number 14, well, we know what happened with item FL, how that was discovered really from the coerced confession of Brendan Dassey. Anyway, Cherie Cohane examined item FL, and she was able to get a robust DNA profile. Remember, this bullet had been sitting apparently in dust for several months. She was able to extract a full genomic DNA profile belonging to Teresa Horbach. Okay, that's fine. But there's one huge problem. Cherie Cohane also contaminated the negative control of the PCR reaction. Her laboratory notes stipulate that if you contaminate your negative control, you throw out the result. You cannot draw any conclusion. You have to start again. And yes, of course, what did Cherie Cohane do? She used all the DNA from the bullet, which meant that she couldn't go back and retest it, which meant that she needed a deviation request form before it could be submitted into court. So there were lots of issues with item FL. So if we have a look at slide 15, well, what Kathleen Zellner did was that she hired Luke Haig He's a forensic ballistic consultant. What Kathleen Zellner wanted to do is to reconstruct the gunshot wounds to the skull. So Luke Haig used bovine scapulars, and they are excellent to use because there are regions of the bovine scapula that have the same thickness as a human skull. So what he did, if we have a look at slide number 16, what he did was he fired .22 long rifle bullets into the bovine scapulars. At the same time, Kathleen Zellner went to Stephen Avery's garage and fired .22 caliber bullets into the garage wall. And all exemplar bullets were examined under high-powered microscope by Dr. Christopher Palanek. Now, Kathleen Zellner was able to obtain item FL from the State Crime Lab. But notice, an officer went with the bullet, right, and stayed right next to Kathleen Zellner and Christopher Palanek all throughout the examination procedure. But these are the major findings. If we have a look at item FL contained no bone shards. It contained shards of wood and red paint. It had wax and cotton fibers. If we have a look at Kathleen's exemplar bullet, the one where she fired into Stephen Avery's garage wall, which is made of wood, lo and behold, not unexpectedly, you find shards of wood, which look very, very similar to what item FL does. However, Haig's exemplar bullets were fired through bovine scapulars. And what Christopher Palanek found was that bone fragments were embedded into the soft lead of the bullet. So that meant that item FL never touched Teresa Halbach's skull. It never went through bone. So this was very, very interesting because the way Ken Kratz portrayed the importance of item FL during the court trial. It was so effective that the jury would have been horrified for what they heard. As soon as Christopher Palanek had come up with the results of item FL that it contained no bone shards, the state completely changed their story and walked away from item FL, said, oh, we don't need item FL, not important. But they said, oh yeah, but because it contained Teresa Halbach's DNA, it somehow must have touched her. So now, quite clearly, the state is in speculation land, right? The state is in deep, deep trouble now because of item FL. Kathleen Zellner, and if you have a look at the filing, if you have a look at the little video that I did, Kathleen Zellner can explain why Teresa Halbach's DNA is on the bullet. Because Shariko Hain contaminated it, either accidentally or deliberately, because Shariko Hain had extracted Teresa Halbach's DNA at the workbench. She already had contamination with her negative control. She could have easily contaminated the bullet with Teresa Halbach's DNA. But the state cannot explain why item FL contains wood. And I'm sure we know that the victim is not Pinocchio or made of wood. So the state is in deep, deep trouble, all because of item FL. Okay, if we have a look at slide number 17. Now, search dogs were brought onto the Avery salvage yard, both cadaver dogs and also scent dogs. What you immediately note are two things. The majority of the dog tracks are off the Avery salvage yard, right? Now remember, the state said that Teresa Halbach and her Toyota RAV4 never left the Avery auto salvage yard, yet you can see by the dog tracks, they are predominantly off the salvage site, not on the salvage site. But I want you to note something very important. The two red squares indicate a lack of dog tracks, right? That's both a cadaver dog and a scent dog. Well, we know the tragic story of Brendan Dassey, who told Fassbender, Oh, yeah, that's how we drove the RAV4. We drove it in the route shown in the red squares. Well, if that was the case, where are the dog tracks? Where are the scent dogs? Where are the cadaver dogs? Nowhere. The dog tracks are very, very revealing. And a lot of researchers, McGilla and other people have done, and also Braun, Millbilly, have done excellent research when it comes to the dog tracks. Have a look at those. So the dog tracks were very, very telling. All right, guys, let's have a look at slide number 18. We're progressing quite well. Well, Kathleen Zellner then consulted with a forensic fire scientist by the name of Dr. John DeHaan. And Kathleen Zellner said, there isn't anybody in the world that knows more about burning bodies than he does. And DeHaan made the comment, I know what it takes to keep a body burning and what it takes to accomplish a certain amount of destruction. And if you read the filing that the state did, the filing showed no respect at all, including to Dr. DeHaan. And if we have a look at slide number 19, what we have here on the left-hand side is Stephen Avery's burn pit. And allegedly, human cremains were isolated from that burn pit, as we can see down below. And I still believe that BB has got the best explanation of the whole lot. Came in a box and left in a box. Because those cremains, if you have a look at them and you compare them to the right-hand side, that was a human body that was placed in a crematorium, a professional crematorium. And you can see that the bones that were resulted were very, very heavily calcined, but they were fragmented. That's exactly what you see on the left-hand side. Now, in order to convert a human being to those fragments, you need to expose them to extremely high temperatures for around about a minimum of 2 hours. And DeHaan argued that there's no way an open burn pit like Stephen Avery's burn pit would ever have enough fuel or be hot enough to convert a human being. Yes, you can burn a person, but you can't convert them to bone fragments. Okay, so let's have a look at slide number 20. This is the burn barrels. Now, there's definitely some shenanigans going on with the burn barrels, especially Yonder burn barrel number 2. And again, a lot of good people have done a phenomenal, I think Moving On has done a lot of good work about the burn barrels. Now, what's interesting is that the Yonder burn barrel was seized on November the 6th. It was then searched on November the 7th and the 8th, and no bones were found in the burn barrel. A group of searchers went to the deer camp on the 12th. And remember, at the deer camp, there was a burn barrel that was hit upon by the dogs. Lo and behold, on the same day, on November the 12th, bones were now found in Yonder burn barrel number 2. So there's definitely a shell game going on with Yonder burn barrel number 2. Okay, guys, let's have a look at slide number 21. Now, this is very important. Our Powder Puff team did a podcast on victimology. So what Kathleen Zellner did was she consulted with a former FBI agent by the name of Greg McCrary. And basically, the FBI agent told Kathleen Zellner in black and white, what happened plus why did it happen equals who did it. And he stated that victimology analysis is critical. And it was very important to look at everyone that Teresa had been in touch with. And he made the poignant remark, 70 to 80% of people who are murdered by someone that they actually know. Sexual relationships need to be looked at. Boyfriends need to be looked at. And especially ex-boyfriends should definitely be part of the suspect pool. And we all know that Scott Blowdorn and Ryan Hilligus didn't even have to give an alibi, which is quite ridiculous when one thinks about it. Okay, let's have a look at slide number 22. Well, we all know that Teresa Halbach went to the auto salvage yard to do a photo shoot because Stephen Avery was selling his sister's, whose name is Barb, her minivan. right? So it was just a normal photo shoot. And Teresa Horbach had been to the Avery salvage yard many times before. She knew exactly where she was going. Ken Kratz, during the trial, had to make it a nefarious, that Stephen had nefarious intentions. And he stated, even in the media, he said he targeted her. Teresa is lured onto the property. So, in other words, he had to give a reason, an excuse as to why Stephen called Teresa Horbach to come and take a photograph of the minivan. But remember, a record is kept. When you ring up Auto Trader, they know exactly who you are and they know exactly who's going to your property to take a photograph. Ridiculous. We have a look at slide 23. Well, Stephen was interrogated on November the 9th by Fassbender and Wiegert, and he was arrested on that day as well. But he told the investigators, he said two important things. He said, look, I saw her leave. I saw her leave the Avery salvage yard, but he also said that Bobby, who's his nephew, his vehicle was gone as well. And we all know what happened with that standoff. So if we have a look at slide number 24. Now, Kathleen Zellner worked out a rough plan or rough map of essentially where Teresa Horbach had gone based on the phone cell tower pings. Basically, her last ping was at 241, and that was the Whitelaw cell tower. After 241s, there were no further pings. There was no more activity on her phone. Well, if you work it out roughly, that puts her very, very close to Cuss Road. Now, you compare that with what the state alleged. The state alleged that Teresa Horbach never left the Avery salvage yard nor her vehicle. So this is in complete contrast to what the state had proposed. We have a look at slide number 25. Kathleen Zellner asked a very important question, and she asked, was Teresa Horbach actually assaulted or killed at Cuss Road? Because her last cell tower ping puts her very close to Cuss Road. And as we can see in that diagram there, there's quite a lot of police activity at the end of Cuss Road. Now, if nothing was meant to have occurred at Cuss Road, what are all these resource vehicles and law enforcement officers doing at Cuss Road? So let's have a look at slide number 26. And this is truly amazing. Now, we know that there's plenty of crime scene tape. There are investigators absolutely everywhere. And Millbilly and others have done excellent research by listening into the phone calls involving the law enforcement officers. And we know that something major occurred at Cuss Road. Yet, in a report, and I quote, a potential burial site of interest to both a cadaver dog and a bloodhound located in the woods south of the end of Cuss Road, west of the scene, was photographed and examined. Nothing was recovered from this site, right? So move along, guys. Nothing to see here. So let's have a look at slide number 26. Well, this is my number 27, my apologies. This is one of my favorite slides. I put this together with the nothing has occurred here. You can see that there's an ambulance. There are many squad cars. There are likely to be quite a few investigators, detectives, because we have the sign in and sign out sheets. But we've also got the crime lab, right? So this is an amazing array of law enforcement officers and also resources for nothing. And so Colburn was asked by Ken Kratz, and I quote, this is something that Mr. Erdl yesterday talked about, a potential burial site. But what wasn't? Was that your understanding that it turned out not to be? Answer, yes, it turned out to be nothing. And guys, from that was the end of the discussion of Cuss Road and the potential burial site. That was it. So guys, let's have a look at slide 28. Now, This is truly amazing. The star witness for the state was indeed Bobby Dassey, and we all know why. Because he said that he actually saw Teresa drive up, start to take photographs. He never said that he saw his uncle, but what he did say was that he saw Teresa walking towards Stephen's trailer. When he left to go hunting, he didn't see Teresa, he didn't see Stephen, but he noted that the vehicle was still there. So, in effect, Bobby Dassey threw his own uncle under the bus, and he indeed was the Grim Reaper. That was a big, big turning point for Stephen, his own nephew. Now, if we have a look at slide 29, guys, we're nearly finished, guys. Thank you for your patience. Well, all of a sudden, his own brother, Brian, states, and I quote, I distinctively remember Bobby telling me Stephen could not have killed her because I saw her leave the property on October 31st, 2005. Excuse me? That's the complete contrast to what he said in court. And so Kathleen Zellner said, Bobby Dassey must have been lying. So if we look at slide number 30, well, maybe this is the reason why Bobby Dassey actually lied. Because what they did was they confiscated the computer which was in Bobby Dassey's room. Not Brendan's, but Bobby Dassey's room. And as you can see, and I apologize for some of the search terms here, you can see that it was pretty nasty stuff. And I think Bobby was 19 years old at the time, and they actually were able to pattern match the searches when Bobby Dassey was at home. Couldn't have been Brendan, couldn't have been Blaine, because they were at school. What Kathleen Zellner said was very disturbing. By looking at the search terms and the images that were pulled down, she said, whoever was looking at these images had a fascination with death, torture, bondage, pedophilia, compulsive, obsessive, hundreds of hours, thousands and thousands of images. No, she's not talking about Ken Kratz. She's talking about Bobby Dassey's computer, right? So this is damning. And I'm telling you right now, guys, in Australia, if you had this on your computer, you would be doing jail time. And I'm sure the panel will discuss what actually happened to the computer, the hard disks that were placed on CDs and DVDs, and how the state was very nefarious in preventing the defense from gaining access to that information. So let's have a look at slide number 31. Well, if you go to court, you have to give an alternative to what the murder scenario actually was. So what Kathleen Zellner did was that she actually did a reconstruction of the events that led to the eventual murder of Teresa. She looked at Bobby Dassey, Scott Tadich, Brendan Dassey, and Stephen Avery. So she was able to do a reconstruction time-wise. And the scary thing is, it all fitted perfectly. So if we have a look at slide number 32, this is the important one, because on slide 32 in the court, the only person that was able to alibi Bobby Dassey was Scott Tadich. The only person that was able to alibi Scott Tadich was Bobby Dassey. And if you have a look on the right-hand side, this is the critical diagram. Now, Stephen Avery said that he saw Teresa Horbach turn left on 147. Bobby Dassey, on the other hand, said, no, I went right. And that was confirmed by Scott Tadich. So Bobby Dassey went the opposite direction to what Teresa Horbach was going. However, Scott Tadich was going in the same direction that Teresa Horbach was. If Bobby Dassey had turned left and followed Teresa Horbach, that means that both Teresa, Bobby, and Scott were in the same general location and time. So that cannot be a fluke. That potentially could be very, very significant. Let's have a look at slide number 33. And I apologize. It is very traumatic, but from the timing, Teresa Horbach, or the victim, was dead within 12 minutes. So that means from the time she arrived to the time she left and met her fate, 12 minutes had gone by. And that's pretty scary. But I want to say, guys, this is speculative, right? Cannot be proven. It is a speculative scenario. All right, guys, we're nearly finished. Let's have a look at slide 34. Well, now this is extremely controversial. Kathleen Zellner then had a look at Dr. Eisenberg and her notes. And Dr. Eisenberg was the forensic anthropologist for the state. She's the one that looked at the cremains. Now, remember, guys, this is important. Dr. Leslie Eisenberg never set foot on the Avery salvage yard. She never saw the burn pit, and she never went to Cuss Road, or she never went to the gravel pits, the Manitowoc County gravel pits. She was handed a box of bones, and she was asked, all right, what are these bones? So if we have a look at slide number 35, this is where all the controversy took place. Now, they found human cremains, allegedly, in Stephen Avery's burn pit. But lo and behold, they found a cut, burnt pelvic bone in the Manitowoc County gravel pit. And you can see here on the right-hand side, the skeleton. But what you note is what's absent from the Manitowoc County gravel pit. See all the bones in white? They're the bones that weren't found in that debris pile, right? So that was very interesting. So if part of a pelvis was found in the burn pit, what's the other part of her pelvis doing in the Manitowoc County gravel pit over more than 2 miles away? That was bizarre. Now, Dr. Eisenberg was asked in court, you still suspect them of being human pelvic bone? And she answered, suspected, possible human. Now, guys, what on earth does that mean? Clearly, Dr. Eisenberg was sitting on the fence. She didn't want to give a definitive answer. Ken Kratz spent 20 seconds talking about the bones in the Manitowoc County gravel pit. He said they're not evidence at all. That was it. End of the party. So, guys, let's have a look at slide number 36. Well, lo and behold, when the bones were analyzed, there were 3 debris piles in the Manitowoc County gravel pit, and wait for it, Dr. Leslie Eisenberg had stated in her report that at those 3 sites there were cut, burnt human bone fragments. So if Dr. Eisenberg said, hey guys, we've got no duplicate bones, it means we have one victim. Even she said and admitted that there were human bones in the debris pile. So now we have 3 separate, well, 4 when you have a look at the diagram, separate geolocations of human cremains. Ken Kratz did not want to discuss the bones in the Manitowoc County gravel pit. All right, now let's have a look at slide 37. We're nearly finished, guys. Now, Kathleen Zellner consulted with her own forensic anthropologist, Dr. Stephen Symes, and he looked at all the notes, he looked at all the reports, he looked at all the findings, and the first thing he said was, it's, and I quote, it's highly suspicious you have some dismemberment going on. It's quite clear that the victim was cut up into pieces. But if you have a look at Brendan Dassey's confession, he goes, oh, no. I held Teresa Horbach by the legs, and my uncle held her by the arms, and we threw her into the fire. He never mentions that dismemberment took place. It's clear that Brendan had no idea what he was talking about. The mere fact that you had knife marks and cuts and saw blade cuts on the bones means that, unfortunately, the victim was cut into small pieces. Brendan never mentioned that at all. And don't forget, the investigators would have known, Fassbender and Uyghur would have known that the victim in actual fact had been cut up into pieces. Can Kratz try to say, oh, yeah, she was cut up to pieces because they used a shovel? Well, a shovel is not going to do a fine blade cut. Ridiculous. So if we have a look at slide 38, you can see that Dr. Symes actually showed a bone, a fragment that was taken, high-powered microscope picture. You can see it's got a fine blade cut. That's known as a hesitation cut mark, which means that a person starts to cut into the bone and then stops, right? But quite clearly, nature doesn't produce a cut like that or a line like that. Someone had put a saw or a fine blade onto the victim. No question about it. And in actual fact, Dr. Symes had a test bone where he had cut various cuts into the bone. He could actually determine the size of the blade. And he reckons that all the knives in the deer dressing kit and a hacksaw blade would do those cuts. So let's have a look at slide number 39. And guys, we're nearly finished. This to me is the ultimate tragedy. And that is the state prevented their own coroner for stepping foot onto the Avery salvage yard. Normally, if a body or human cremains are found, the first person that's contacted is the coroner. The coroner has, in Wisconsin, a power over the sheriff, and in actual fact, the coroner can actually fire the sheriff. Deborah Catch didn't know about the findings. She only found out on TV. So when she rang up her work to say, hey, what's going on? Mark Uyghur said, I don't have to tell you about bones. She was called into the office the day after, and she was threatened. If you step foot on the salvage yard, you're going to be arrested. And of course, no coroner on the salvage yard, no coroner at Cass, no coroner in the Manitowoc County gravel pit. All you got is a box of bones. That's it. So no one actually knows where those bones have come from. You can do anything you want. So guys, let me finish with this. And this is the final slide after our 10 podcast series. And you can see the tragedy, the happiness and the tragedy all on one slide, where Stephen had a young family, twin boys, 5 kids, happy, and everything turned really, really bad. And he was released because he was wrongfully imprisoned, and just by the analysis of one pubic hair showed that it wasn't his. It was, in actual fact, Gregory Allen. He did a $36 million lawsuit, and lo and behold, the only person who had a civil lawsuit in the county was Stephen Avery, and he was the one, along with his nephew, got arrested for murdering Teresa Hallbach. And it is quite tragic. And you can have a look at the look of Kathleen Zona's face. She said, I quote, I felt a very controlled rage. I'm sure that after getting her filing back and her report, it wouldn't be controlled anymore. It'll be full on. Well, look, thank you guys. That's the review. I'd like to thank my panel for the excellent help. I'd like to thank Neverly for helping me put together the podcast. She's written down a lot of notes, asked a lot of questions, helped me throughout. But I hope, guys and listeners, that the podcasts have been helpful to your understanding. We certainly don't know all. We certainly don't know all the answers, but hopefully they have been of benefit to you. Thank you very much, guys. That's the end of the presentation. Guys, let's open it up to the panel.
I have a few questions.
Sammy.
Brownie was asking, did the experts find different ways to produce the various blood stains? For example, could the blood stain near the ignition be reproduced in more than one way?
I think what they did was they used a Q-tip. And so if you dip a bit of blood, if you dip a Q-tip in blood, you can just simply, with the end of the Q-tip, just do a curve mark. Blood normally doesn't do a mark like that. It's very, very unusual. And so, yes, it can be easily reproduced with a Q-tip. Sammy.
Dr. Silkman, if I could interject for 1 second, please. That comment may have been related to the blood swab, the blood pattern on the back of the RAV door.
Right.
In which case, I think the important part of the message is that what they showed was that the blood pattern was not created as per the state's narrative. There probably could have been multiple ways that that blood pattern could have been created, yes. just not the way the state said. I apologize for not knowing the context of the question.
Oh, no. That's no problems at all, because what they did is that they actually simulated a bleeding finger and then to turn the key. And so what they did, every time they did that, the finger never got close enough to the ignition panel. The finger never touched the ignition panel to put blood on it. However, what they did note was that if you were actively bleeding, you actually left blood on the key, right? And when they examined the key, it was clean. There was no blood at all. Bibi.
Yeah, I want to talk about item FL for a second. I just have a little observation. You said,
Yes.
you know, how they sent the officer to go with item FL?
Yes.
With Zellner and her experts?
Yes.
Well, I think they really more needed one to go with item FL to meet Miss Cohen.
Oh, yes. Well, look, Buting and Strang actually asked the state if they could actually observe Cherie Cohen manipulate, work on item FL. Now, wait a minute. Wait a minute. The response was, you can't come into our PCR lab because you can likely contaminate our samples. And of course, what did Cohen do? She contaminated the samples herself.
Well, and they had new interns starting, and they had them over there. But yes. I really think they needed an officer to watch her, what she was doing.
Correct. As in
more than what Zellner and her expert might do to the bullet.
Correct. But it's amazing how it was done in reverse, right? They didn't want Buting and Strang in their domain, but they had to have an officer in Kathleen Zellner's domain.
Yes. Just like the filing, just like everything, just like always. Yes.
Correct. Jack 61.
Well, to go along with that argument, the reading the pretrial documents, there was this massive argument between Buting and Gahn because the defense wanted to be there, and Gahn was just like, "Oh, is this going to kill everything? We can't move. We have so much sensitive stuff in there." And then they turn around and she contaminates the hell out of it.
Correct. That is absolutely correct. And you see, if it was contaminated by non-nefarious means, like an accident, we can understand that. So what you do is you throw out all the results and you start again. But if you use all the DNA from the bullet, it's a one-off deal. So you can't do it again. Bibi.
Well, it's almost as if they couldn't let them be there because they knew something was going to happen with that.
Well, correct.
Just saying.
Yes, correct. If, in other words, if you're going to accidentally add some DNA to that tube, you don't want the defense looking over your shoulder, right? So, yeah, but the big problem, of course, guys, is because she used all the DNA, no one can reproduce the results. It's a one-time deal. All right, guys, do we have any other further questions? Big Jeff?
And that was just kind of bullshit too. You know, because you showed us many times how exactly simple it is to buffer that out.
Correct. Her own protocols dictate that you never use the entire sample. You always keep half. But she decided to use, now if you notice, all the DNA sample was used for the key and the bullet. So put her in the garage, put her in the garage, and put her in the house. And both samples can't be redone, can't be retested. I wonder why. Big Jeff.
Conveniently.
Oh, yes, correct.
Isn't that convenient? Yeah, I wanted to bring up one of the old podcasts that we did, Dr. Silkman, together on an old TTT, where
Yes.
we brought up the fact that Sherry Culhane also said at trial that that there are several technical papers that indicate that the shedder status of a of someone who's known to be a shedder can actually mask the DNA. Right. And she said, she cited, there are several technical papers that indicate this.
Yes.
To my knowledge, you're not aware of these papers. To my knowledge, they might be out there. I'd love to see these references. Well, but shouldn't we nominate Sherry for the Guinness Book of World Records for twice incriminating the same victim on junk science 2 times?
Correct.
To put falsely in prison.
I think the 2 articles are written in her diary at home, and that's why we haven't found them.
Correct. Well, I could talk for an hour on that, but basically, Dr. Carl Reich said the shedder status is junk science, literally is. And you know what's bizarre is if you have a look at the experiment involving the key, right? So Sherry Culhane, if he's a good shedder, how do you explain the fact that now he has left 10 times less DNA on the key than when he originally touched it, right?
And 0 time has elapsed, right? Yeah.
Exactly right. So therefore,
This may or may not be addressing the question Brownie has is, was Stephen Avery sweating during the key holding test?
It actually doesn't make any difference because sweat doesn't have any DNA in it. So the source of the cells is skin cells. So basically what they're doing, it's called touch DNA. So it doesn't matter about whether you're sweating or not. You've got to shed skin cells. All human beings shed skin cells. That's no big deal. But what you notice is when they did the experiment with Kathleen Zellner, when Stephen Avery held the key for 12 minutes, he now left 10-fold less DNA than what Sherry Culhane found on that key, right? Now, how do you work that one out? If he's meant to be a good shedder, he would have left a similar or more DNA on that key.
That's right.
But it didn't. It was 10-fold less.
Brownie also wants to know, could it be her phone that got to Cuss Road but not herself?
Oh, look, absolutely. I mean, remember that it's following the cell phone, the ping of the cell phone. We don't know what happened to her. But what the cell tower ping indicates, she would have been around that area. Big Jeff probably has a better perspective than me. But yes, it's following the mobile phone. We don't know where she was attacked. We don't know what happened to that mobile phone. Big Jeff.
Yeah, I would say, based on, I did a presentation over on Millbillies and and I'll be doing more. I'm going to do a cell phone school series, but the point that you're making is absolutely correct. Is that it was very unlikely that her phone would ping at that tower. She had to move south to the Avery salvage yard. And my personal opinion is the causality of what happened at Cuss Road drives Zelda to think that this place that's south of Avery's was indeed Cuss Road.
Yes.
Because of that ping. The causality, we don't know. We can't read Zellner's mind. But certainly it's very unlikely that she pinged at the tower that she did while she was at the Avery.
Right.
Yes.
Impossible.
Yes.
All right, and
Sam.
one more question from Brownie, and she says, when and where did Blaine say he was? Oh, wait a minute. Let me redo that. Sorry. When and where did Blaine say he saw Bobby in a blue-green SUV?
I think it was it Blaine? I think it was Blaine when he was on the school bus.
On the school bus, yeah.
on the school bus, right? Which would have been 3:45, around 3:45, around that time.
I think so. Yep. Thank you.
Yes,
And
I think
which
he's asking where exactly, like physically. Was
yeah,
it on
he
the?
would have been driving. He would have been driving west. So if you take a think about where Avery Road intersects 147, right? There's kind of a
yes,
T there.
a T junction.
So
Yes,
if you're driving from east, and Avery Road goes north to south, and I believe north, if you're going north up, then you're moving. You'd go across 147 if you're at Avery's. Right?
yes,
So,
correct.
So certainly the bus was moving on my mental diagram of that from right to left, which would be east to west. The school bus, yeah, the school bus was going that way, and Bobby was going the other way, as if he had taken a right out of the Avery salvage yard.
Correct.
And the bus was coming the other way, but it was before that junction, obviously. So that was sort of the geography of that.
Yes. So that, I mean, that might account for why, possibly why the Toyota RAV4 ended up on 147 at the turnaround. We don't know. We don't know how long it has been there. We don't know where it went. So there's a lot of gaps. There's a lot of gaps in our knowledge. Jack 61.
Yeah, I just put a link in the chat on the YouTube comments live feed, and going back to the CD, the Belly CD. This link that I put up is directly to the motion that Zollner filed when she finally got a hold of that CD, and it's also got an affidavit from Buting stating that, of course, they never got it, nor the report. People forget there's a 2,400-page report as well.
Yes.
There is a return of evidence from the DASI search warrant contained within that. It's also in the Kratz communication discovery emails, which is part of this. It's a real sticking point to me on, well, like a million different levels, but they get the CD. Fassbender and the state get the CD. They interrogate Brendan 2 days later. They never one time mentioned the computer. Not one time.
No
questions. Okay. Now let's follow this a little bit further. About a month later, Kratz files for his Denny motion. That's in June of 2006. That's about a month later.
Yes.
Okay, 6 months later, there's still, I mean, there's a lot of items in that discovery dump that the defense should have got. Probably Lloyd should have gotten part of this stuff, but of course it's in December. He turns over hundreds of items, and within that was supposed to be this CD and this report. Of course, we know that. Of course, he didn't get it. And then these I didn't link it, but these references later that Kratz made in his stipulation project about Brendan's computer. Again, another manipulation. It's a real sticking point for me. It really irritates me. I just wanted to.
The fact that it's Brendan's computer is what you're talking about, right? They label it Brendan's computer. Yeah.
Yes.
Correct.
It's a real sticking point to me for further manipulation.
Yes, it is. Big Jeff.
So just I wanted to exchange a little with Jax about that. Do we actually have the Fassbender report that they reference in the state's motion that said everything you needed to know about the Veely report was in the Fassbender report? Do we have that report?
I think there is a report.
I'm not sure what's in. I'm not sure if it's in that motion. I can't answer that. I'm going to say maybe, but I don't know.
I know some of the things from the DOJ specifically we can't get at because you try and FOIA them and they say we're not subject to that FOIA.
Right. Okay.
Which is also BS. But to me, you have to ask yourself, in accordance with your outrage, why did Veely create that report in the first place? The state's argument is they had all the data, they just chose not to look at it, right? And there's nothing in the Veely report that could have been, done by yourself, And I say, well, that's like handing somebody that you have a report due in school, and what you do is you give the teacher the dictionary and say, look, all the words from the report you need are in that dictionary. You just have to grab them by yourself and put them in the right order.
Or like asking a lawyer, or a lawyer not asking a question because they don't want to know the answer. You know,
exactly.
you know what I'm saying?
Why did Veely create that report in the first place, right?
I mean,
And what was it to help because they know that an aggregation of pornography can be sometimes useful to a jury in helping. It's not really indicative. It's not necessarily guaranteed proof that somebody's a murderer, but can be a sign of behavior. The fact that the prosecution had it and chose to bury it. Why was it created in the first place? Well, you have to ask yourself, why did they create it in the first place? And then why did they bury it? And the more you think about that, the more nefarious it becomes.
Well, of course, it pointed away. It pointed towards somebody else and not Stephen, because they checked Stephen's computer as well, right? And that was clean.
yes.
That's right. But Veely didn't know that, right? That's the sorry, Jack.
No, he didn't.
Veely didn't know that, which to me is the important.
Right.
Yes.
Well, I think that it was. I think it may have been, and I'm speaking out of turn because I don't really know the answer to that question. Only that I think that that's just something that they did. It's a procedure that made it easy for when he handed everything over back to his state handlers. Here's the report or here's the raw data, and then here's the easy to read version on this CD I created for you. It's a final report. It's got everything on there in an easy to read fashion.
Yes. Jack, if I could just say, thank you for that. But could you imagine what Ken Kratz would have done if all this information was actually on Stephen's computer?
He would have had a parade.
It would have been front and center, correct?
It would have been a parade in Calumet. Yeah, Calumet, Manitowoc, parade time.
Billboards.
Broadcast message. Oh my God.
Yep. They would have had another press conference.
That was the other side of that because, basically this goes completely under the radar, gets buried under the rug or
correct
or Fassbender's back pocket and probably in his garage or whatever. But it doesn't matter.
Correct.
They kept it away from him.
Correct. So they were hoping that all of those pornographic searches were on Stephen's computer, but oops, it's on Bobby's computer, which they called Brendan's computer, right? But if you notice during Brendan's trial, did Fallon or Kratz ever bring up the pornographic images on the computer during his trial?
Well,
why not?
I actually did a word search on that the other day on Brendan's trial, and the only time, unless I missed it, the only time the DASI computer was ever mentioned was 2 times, and it was basically Brendan complaining because he wanted to get on the phone and Blaine was on the computer or something that maybe vice versa.
Correct.
And he wanted him to get off there so he could use the phone. That was it.
Correct. And back then, if you were on the internet, it tied your phone line. It tied your line, so you couldn't get unless they had a device that could split the signal. But if you were on the computer, you couldn't receive a normal house call because the line occupied the internet. Big Jeff.
I just wanted to point out that Brendan probably wanted to play his PlayStation because he enjoyed playing sort of the first person shooter games with his friends on PlayStation.
Correct.
And that's what he needed that line for, not so much that he wanted to talk to the people on the phone. It might have been phone, but I think that his predominant internet activity was PlayStation.
Correct.
Which is interesting.
Yes.
Which those records weren't checked anyway. They also leave a forensic pattern as well. That's traceable. None of that was attempted to be traced either.
Yes. Awesome. All right, guys. Do we have any further questions? Neverly.
Good morning, everyone. First of all, I wanted to thank Dr. Silkman for this exhaustive work that he's done on MaM 1 and MaM 2. I had the privilege to work on with him on MaM 2, and that was an experience. So thank you, Dr. Silkman.
Oh, no, thank you.
You're welcome. Brownie has another question. He said, the state suggested in the response that sweat helped the skin cells get on the key. What is Dr. Silkman's take on that?
Can you repeat that question again?
Certainly. The state suggested in their response that sweat helped the skin cells get on the key. What is your, Dr. Silkman, take on that?
No, you don't. The sweat is just a liquid medium. That's it. It's not you slough off skin cells, sweat or no sweat. And so what when they did the hood latch swab, for example, it wasn't blood, it wasn't saliva, it wasn't urine, and it wasn't semen. So it had to be skin, right? But on the key, the question is, how do you get it? Where did the DNA come from? They didn't test it, right? They took a swab, and Sharika Haynes says, "Oh, look, I found DNA, Stephen Avery's DNA on it." You don't know the source. That's a problem. But here's the real issue. The state said that Stephen Avery was actively bleeding. So if he was actively bleeding and he left the blood near the ignition switch, how come there's no blood on the key? Now, if you argue, oh, well, he cleaned the key, if he cleaned the key, why is his DNA still on it, right? And if he was smart enough to clean the key, why didn't he get rid of the RAV4? So it all comes back to the same thing. Put it this way, we don't know what the source of the DNA is on the key. It's not blood. No blood was noted on there.
To me, thank you, Dr. Silkman. To
No
me,
problems.
it seems like the state, in their latest reply, did everything in their might to latch on the slightest possibility that something is possible. And as we know in life, everything is possible. And they
Yes,
would defy science. And when, in court, we heard that to the best of scientific, reasonable knowledge
correct,
or whatnot,
correct.
they have gone further than that. As long as it's possible, 0.0001%, they say, well,
Yes,
it's possible. So they
correct.
minimized and negated and rejected all the experiences,
They
experiments that have
correct.
done. Yeah.
They didn't care. They didn't care about the DNA results at all.
Yeah,
High,
because they
low,
know. Yeah.
inconsistent. They didn't care. They just simply
Yeah.
bypassed all of them. But
Yeah.
to me, it was very interesting how they handled item FL, because item FL was the hot piece of forensic evidence, and suddenly they dropped it. They
Very
dropped it like
interesting.
a hot
Yeah.
potato. Correct.
Yeah.
All right,
There
guys.
was
Any
another
other questions?
question. Yeah,
Yes.
there was another question in the chat. Somebody asked, is it possible that whoever killed Teresa have burned her first and then cut her up?
No. Not on the basis of the fragmentation of the bones, because when you burn the bones, they would be very brittle, and that's exactly the argument that Eisenberg said. Oh, the reason why I didn't cut into the bone, the pelvic bone, to determine if it was human, was I was scared that the bone will fragment. So therefore, you can't account for why heavily burnt bones would have that you can cut into them. They'll be very, very fragile.
In
So
other
it
words,
looks,
the nice straight cut
yes,
means that the nice
the
clean
bone was,
straight cut
yes,
means that the
correct. The
bone
bone
was
was rigid.
still,
Correct.
yeah.
The
Plus, we
bone was
know that she
rigid.
wasn't burned in Stephen's burnt area, not even a pit,
No,
but area, which was
correct.
flat. Nor they could put a whole body in the burn barrel. So she was
No,
cut
they
first.
can't. No, that
Thank you.
you'd have to cut up the body. Correct. She was dismembered. The victim was dismembered. There's no question about it. The victim was cut to pieces, smaller pieces. All right, guys. Any other further questions? Are we all good? A big Jeff.
How can we end so soon? In my opinion, you read that. I think everyone should take the time to either read the response or listen to the other people who have read it, because there's a lot of
Yes.
people reading it live, talking about it, it is time to take the gloves off. That
Yes.
was a desperate response by the state, invoking procedural bar and invoking underpled information by Zellner, meaning that she didn't make a good enough case. It's time again, now more than ever, to make sure that you're aware, so that you can argue with the guilters about what the rightness here, about the merits of the case, because that's really what needs to be heard. The way that Zellner is going to overcome the procedural bar is by understanding why these things are important to be brought up, why they're new.
Yes.
And if we just let the state get away with, it'd be nice to look, but we just can't look. We're procedurally barred from looking at this stuff. It's nonsensical, especially since much of this procedural bar stems from Stephen, who is has a learning disability in the first place. He filed this pro se motion in 2013. He's in prison. He doesn't have access to a lawyer. He's indigent. The state says, well, that's not a good enough reason. They say those words in the it's not a good enough reason.
Sorry, Picture. The best was ignorance of the law is not an excuse.
Unbelievable. You know what I mean? What's a person supposed to do there in prison? And the answer basically is, we don't care. The truth of the matter is, these are good enough reasons to be bringing some of these issues up, because there's clearly something else going on here. You only have to look back to 1985 to understand the level to which they'll go to get their way, and it's just unbelievable. So I'm sorry. I'll stop.
No. Well, my assessment of it is this: the only thing that's keeping him in prison is the fact that Shariko Hain found Teresa Horbach's DNA on Ida Meffel. If Kathleen Zellner can remove Ida Meffel as an official piece of forensic evidence, that means that you cannot put Teresa Horbach in his trailer. You cannot put her in his garage. You cannot link Stephen Avery to the murder, right? And that's why they said in the brief, the bullet came in contact with Teresa Horbach, which means that it ties the gun to the bullet, to Teresa Horbach, to the murder. Although Ida Meffel never touched her skull. Zoe.
Whoa.
Zoe, you didn't press the off button, did you?
No. we're still on. No,
awesome.
I have a question. If Miss Big Hair Lady spit on the bullet and put her own DNA on it, and there was no chance to test it again, how is it even possible this piece of evidence was used in court? How is that even possible?
Correct, 100% agree. Her own laboratory rules state all the results from Ida Meffel need to be tossed out, all of them, and do again. However, she used up all the DNA, which means she had to get a deviation request form. Otherwise, it could never be submitted in court. And Garn said, "Oh, look, come on, guys, you have to be reasonable. you have to accept a bit of diversion, which was unbelievable.
You have to have common sense."
Correct.
That's what you said. Common sense.
Yet, if the defense tried to introduce that, the state would have said, "No, mate, you can't. You have to toss it out and do it again." So it's, what's good for the goose is good for the gander, right?
Isn't it only able to be used to exclude somebody and not to include?
Correct.
Once it's been contaminated, yeah.
Correct. So you can't use it for inclusionary purposes. Shariko Hain wanted to use it for inclusionary purposes. So she did two things wrong. A, contaminate the negative control, and use the result to include that it was Teresa Halbach's DNA on there.
And the whole
Sorry,
deviation,
Neverly.
I'm sorry, the whole deviation protocol, we had a question from Shri about that. She asked for a deviation protocol. Is that correct, Dr. Silkman?
Correct. Yes.
And then who signed it and when?
Somebody from outside her lab, wasn't
Yes,
it was signed by,
exactly.
I think her surname was De Groot, and it was from the Milwaukee laboratory.
Not even her own supervisor.
No, that's correct. That is correct. That's correct. Guys, can you continue the conversation? I've got to be excused for a minute.
Sure.
So I'm going to jump in on that and say, let's walk from item FL. Let's walk 10 steps back. And what do we get? We get the setup on Brendan. It was all set up, in my opinion, to force him to give them the story they wanted, to give them the excuse to get another search warrant, to go into the Avery garage, to suddenly find item FL and item FK. If you this newer response, they talk about, these two bullets or these two fragments, but let's just think about this. Big Jeff, I know you're there. Think about this. They found only 2 fragments around that freaking garage and house. How many thousands of bullets do you think were out there? Even from Reginald, the man that owned the trailer? Rolly, yeah.
Rolly Johnson.
How many bullets did he say he fired? 3,000+,
2 to 3,000.
whatever it was.
2 to 3,000, yeah. That's ridiculous.
So that's just my comments. Walking that step backwards and seeing how they led Brendan down. It was a setup, in my opinion. I believe that totally.
There's a couple things there that really support that argument very well. And the first one is that if you look at the timeline of what was happening on Stephen's end at the time of Brendan's confession, the property bond was going through on the Avery salvage yard, right? And Stephen was literally on the precipice of getting out because the family had put up the bond on money, and they were desperate to keep him in prison. Can you imagine what he could have done if he got out of prison?
That's
right. With regard to getting on the news, look what they did to my house. Look what they did to my garage. They searched, and the very interesting part of what you say about the setup is that even in his own book, Ken Kratz calls item FL the game changer.
That's right.
Now, let me ask anybody who is a fan of sports, because they often use that term in sports. Do you need a game changer if the game is going well in the first place?
Nope.
No, you don't, right? So Stephen's on the precipice of getting, and they did right before that. They went to everybody. You can look at some of the things that were forwarded. They went to all the Dassey boys, right? They re-interviewed Brian Dassey. You can find his interview on YouTube, right? So they definitely, were making the rounds to do whatever they could, because they could not let Stephen get out of prison. They needed to walk him into that trial in his striped jumpsuit with those extra "this is a dangerous guy" handcuffs, mitten things on him.
What did Strang say? Strang said called him a Monopoly game board player come to life.
Yeah. Exactly. And they just couldn't let it happen. So it's so obvious what they did. Somebody said, "Oh my God, look, we interviewed Brendan on November 6th. We got him to say that he saw Teresa Halbach. That he and his brother had to step out of the driveway so that Teresa Halbach could drive out." Right. Listen to that November 6th interview of Brendan, and listen just how easily he could be manipulated. Is it any surprise that after sequestering him for several days, after badgering him, for what they were able to do in a half hour, that it took them a couple of days for them to be able to, what's the right word? Sort of massage his story into what they wanted. That they were able to get him to say anything they wanted. It took them a while, but they were able to do it. And bam, ruin the life of an innocent kid, just because they needed him as a pawn to keep Stephen in prison, and go find this thing, have their March press conference, and just the dominoes all fall from that coerced confession, including the planting of FL, which they didn't find on the scene. Sorry.
Oh, that's okay. Go ahead.
Oh no, I was done. Sorry.
Well, it's interesting too. Once they got this led Brendan down this garden path, and he gives us this big story, and then if you continue to read through the pretrial, String and Beauty come on the scene, and this argument about these what Brennan said, and how I can't remember the exact word. It's not reasonableness, but there are other words. They questioned it and questioned it. It continues on through several motions of allowing his words, his confession only, to be used to add charges to Avery to jack up his bail, which they did. They went up to 750,000, I think, from 500,000. So he wasn't getting out. And even Strang said earlier, relatively early on, you're allowing these charges to be added, which they're not going to stand. They're going to have to be removed at some point in time down the road. And lo and behold, they did right before trial. Kratz had to drop 3 of the charges.
But it was enough. But it was enough to exceed the value of the property bond, right? So that's why they never dropped it and did it at that time.
Yeah, and plus Willis wasn't going to allow it. He demanded that it be they wanted cash. They didn't really want the surety bond with the property. Go figure. They didn't want to let him out, and I don't think. I'm not even sure. I would have been surprised even if they would have raised the actual cash, that Willis would have said, "Okay, let's let him out."
No, he was not getting out.
That's
No
just
way,
the way,
no how.
That's just the way it reads to me going through the pretrial, because you nailed it. They were pulling out all the stuff to keep Avery in jail.
Yeah, if you listen to Dean Strang on the phone calls, though, Dean Strang before the confession was like, I don't see any reason why they're not going to do this. He was pretty confident, and I think the state was pretty scared. I think without the Brendan confession, that is possible he might have got out.
Well, it's possible. I mean, I know later on when they didn't have enough. I'm trying to remember the exact time frame. You may be right. He might have he might have gotten out on the surety bond. I know that they had everything drawn up, but the city people, they had the property value and all that kind of thing. They were ready to go.
Yeah, they were trying to tackle him from every angle they could possibly, slow him down with.
Remember, Stephen was the most dangerous person walking the streets, and Kratz said that he wanted to protect the citizens from him. And didn't he ask for a bail of $2 million, and then they settled to 750? So who knows what else he would have said about Stephen just to keep him in there, because they knew they wanted to. That was all strategic, of course, because they wanted to keep him away from his lawyer, away from his family. It's difficult to get together with a lawyer. It's not practical to talk over the phone. And we even found out that there were some leaked tapes by Ken Kratz, of all people. Did they listen to those too?
That was another filing that Avery did on his own of being surveilled. And that was in 2013, 2014, whatever it was. And they come back and said, "Oh no, we're not doing anything like that." Well, then Kratz releases this video, 4-5 months ago, whatever it was.
I loved it. Yep, there's verification right there.
That's right. So
that proves they're liars.
Absolutely. Well, it comes back and
well, they had an agenda. They had a mission to complete, which is get Stephen Avery, no matter what. It was a mission. That's why they had a blank check. That's why they have professional immunity.
They violated
exactly.
his rights.
Everything. So what's going to happen to Kratz and to everybody else? Nothing. They have that professional immunity, don't they?
Well,
the law is the law, though, and I believe that they have broken the law when they went into. When he makes that claim that he was being surveilled, and they're going, "Oh no, no," and then all that comes out from Kratz. Come on, that's verification and proof right there.
Big Jeff could probably speak better to this than I can, but once you hit a Brady violation, one, or two's even worse. I don't know what that triggers for a prosecutor as far as punishment. I don't know. I think it should automatically trigger a new trial, though. At minimum, a hearing.
Brady's
Big
yes.
Jeff. Thank you, guys. Big Jeff.
Yeah. So the state is trying to argue that the Brady violation, for example, of the CD, right, withholding exculpatory evidence.
Yes.
Didn't even that doesn't matter because Zellner hasn't really made the case as to what oh my god as to why the information that they would have found on the CD would have changed the outcome, and that's the state's kind of poor argument as to why traditionally Brady violations trigger new trials. So
yes, but where do you think Kathleen Zellner can go from here? What can she do?
She has to make the case as to why she has to make the case as to how, if she had that CD available,
yes,
that she could have impugned the defense testimony, the prosecution testimony, and how that would have changed the outcome of the trial. That's the case that she has to make as to why that Brady violation is relevant.
Correct.
So
yeah,
she makes that case, and then game over. New
yes,
hearing.
because it would have looked really bad for Bobby Dassey, especially if they interviewed, if they were able to call up his brother Brian on the stand as well, it would have looked very bad.
Absolutely.
Jack 61.
And the bones. We can't forget about Bonegate 2011.
I was just gonna say that the other Brady.
Yeah.
Correct.
Yeah. So Eisenberg's own notes, as you have correctly pointed out, it directly
human
says
bones.
human
Correct.
bones. I mean,
Correct.
It's right there in her handwriting.
And in CASO, they actually said, they looked at Eisenberg's report to pull out the human bones. So how silly is that? It doesn't look good. But I think it's all smoke and mirrors by the state. I think the state know they're in trouble, and they played their best card. They played their best hand, and now let's hope the judge can see it, can see through it. All right, guys. Do we have any further questions? Neville.
Well, I just feel that now after reading the state report reply twice, to me, what jumped out is that this was like a playwright. You know what I mean? They had a goal,
Yes.
they had a checklist, and they compartmentalized. Sorry about this word; it always gives me trouble.
Compartmentalized.
How do you pronounce it? That one.
Compartmentalized.
Compartmentalized. The whole case.
Compartmentalized.
So they have Avery in prison. Check. They had shock and horror of the presser. Check. And they went down the list. And then later on, because they did all of that separately, they can claim now, like with the item FL, oh, never mind that. She was shot anyways. We don't even need the item FL or FK. Oh, somebody asked about FK. Why wasn't it mentioned as much as FL?
Because no DNA was found on item FK. And also item FK was very badly mangled. The state couldn't prove which rifle it was fired from. That's why they ignored item FK. Right? So, but here's the issue with item FL. They want it both ways. On the one hand, they're saying, don't worry about item FL, but they do state that it contained Teresa Hallbach's DNA. So that's what it still links the bullet to Teresa Hallbach. It may not have been the fatal bullet, but it still links her to the garage. If Kathleen Zellner can eliminate item FL as evidence, then all they got is a circumstantial case against Stephen. That's it. Because forensically, they can't prove that Teresa Hallbach was ever in the trailer nor the garage, right? So they realized that item FL never struck bone, that means that Ken Kratz had to change his hypothesis and say, oh, yeah, it went through her body. But there's one problem. The state can't account for why it's got wood shards and red paint in it. So they're screwed. Either way. Big Jeff.
Yeah. So I wanted to ask you whether or not you recalled any of the lack of forensic evidence in the garage of the trailer being brought up by the state in their response. Because I don't recall.
No, not from what I saw. The only thing that they, sorry, Big Jeff.
But they had AC Rookie had an excellent tweet that says that in consideration of Ryan Hilligus as a possible suspect, that it's just not possible that somebody goes to a certain place, meaning Zellner's theory about, or Stephen's theory that Zellner is stuck with from the 2013 Pro Se, that the blood was taken from his sink.
Yes.
You know, there's no chance that Ryan Hilligus went into Stephen's apartment and left no forensic
That's
evidence of himself
That's right.
being there, right? But
Correct.
yet the garage, the bedroom, it's just ridiculous.
Correct.
They bring up that assertion.
Correct. What's good for the goose is good for the gander. So, you know, you can argue it either way. But to me, I think one of the most important things is to get idomethel tossed out. And they can argue it very, very easily and say, Cohane contaminated it. So they can cite contamination. They can actually cite the laboratory rules. If they can get rid of idomethel, the state's got nothing. They've got a circumstantial case. Neverly.
Yeah, Dr. Silkman, regarding the idomethel, in the state's reply, they said, and Sherry Cohane never even said what kind of DNA was on the bullet.
Correct, because they never
Did
tested it.
They never tested it. Why
They
wasn't
never
that
tested
tested?
it.
On purpose?
Well, put it this way. When she observed idomethel, she saw no blood or stain on it, which meant she was too scared to do a phenolphthalein test because she could have literally taken all the DNA off the bullet. So she never tested it for phenolphthalein. And normally what they do is they do a phenolphthalein test first to ensure that it had blood. Once an item has got blood, then they do another swab and they extract DNA. She said, the bullet probably would have had such little amount of DNA, I decided just to wash the bullet. Right. So she actually bypassed her own rules, because what they normally do is they look for a stain first, prove that there's blood, then do a swab. Jack 61.
I'm remembering a phone call, a dispatch call, and I believe it was Wiegert calling Poggle about these test results coming in from the Wisconsin Crime Lab, where he said, "Did you hear they found blood in the car and the keys?"
Correct.
And they were ecstatic and all giddy and just
correct
going.
And didn't
body
say
parts,
it all paid
that
off?
was all in the same. Yes. It all paid off.
It all paid off.
But well, I mean, from what we're being told, there was no blood on the key.
There was no blood. No, correct. There was no blood, no stain. And also there was no DNA from the actual owner, Teresa Horbuck, nothing. A BB.
So basically you're saying that the bullet that went through somebody has so little DNA on it, but yet the hood latch that somebody opens has so much DNA on it.
Correct.
That sounds logical, yeah.
Correct. Because when you think about it, when you open up a hood latch, you may touch it for a mere second, maybe two. So you're not going to leave a huge amount of trace DNA. But a bullet that actually goes through a human torso, goes through skin, fat, muscle, organ, blood, there was nothing. It's clean.
Right.
It was clean. Correct. It was clean.
Yeah, love it.
So basically, they're expecting perfection and full proof on Stephen's part to show that it wasn't him who did it, However, they leave and give themselves this luxury of every single possible possibility.
Well, that's precisely why Kathleen Zellner got in all the experts to just show how ridiculous the findings were. And Buting was nearly there with Ida-Mafel. Nearly. He just needed a DNA expert to really ram it down. And if the judge kicked out Ida-Mafel, then and there they were in huge trouble. So now trying to get rid of Ida-Mafel now is much harder. But the good thing is they've admitted that Ida-Mafel never touched her skull. Right? So it couldn't have killed her. So it now becomes a moot point, because even though they found the rifle that fired Ida-Mafel, that bullet never struck Teresa Halbach in the skull. And they're saying that the bullet, 2 bullets, caused the skull wounds and the death of Teresa Halbach. They haven't found the bullets, and they haven't found any exit holes, any exit wounds either. Right?
And
So,
they couldn't link Stephen to the gun, except that it was above his head
correct.
and had a sticky note saying Stephen.
Yeah, but that doesn't mean that he fired it that day.
I know. I was being
correct.
yeah.
They also found no blood spatter. They found no
Correct.
blood spatter on that.
Correct. They can't
Or
link,
gunshot residue or anything.
yes, correct. They can't link Stephen to the gun. And they can't link Ida-Mafel to the cranial bone fragments.
And Neverly, they always allow themselves this huge luxury all the way back to the case with Penny, and Steve had the mountain of evidence that he wasn't there or involved in it, and it
Correct.
still wasn't good enough.
Exactly.
Correct.
But they
And let's
had the
not for-
witness. They had the witness who couldn't see, and that was good enough.
That's good.
That's
Exactly.
correct. Penny Bernstein herself.
And
Correct.
let's not forget that the state doesn't even have to have a motive to prove the motive for Stephen or the killer
Which
too,
is
which is
outrageous.
ridiculous.
Yeah.
Or
Because
double standard.
because the Denny does. Yeah, absolutely.
Yep. Unbelievable. So I hope she can get a day in court and can get Ida-Mafel thrown out. That'll be huge.
As it should be. It should be
Correct.
thrown out as it should be.
It should have been thrown out back in 2007, I think, when his trial was on. That's when it should have been thrown out.
And
but
there's sorry.
No, go for it.
And I want you to say, and there's a gun crying and whining about common sense. When you have such sensitive tests about DNA, one should allow for some common sense.
Correct.
To make a mistake. It's like, what? What are you talking
Correct.
about? Remember that?
It's completely unheard of.
Yeah, even the press, the journalists over there, they were like, what are you talking about? Even they knew that he was like so full of it.
Well,
Common sense. Yeah.
the remarkable thing here, guys, is that one of I forgot the lady's name, she said, but wait a minute, if she was able to contaminate the negative control, then why couldn't she have contaminated the bullet sample? Right? Even the journalist worked it out, right? Because that's what Buting said in the court. And Garn just smiled. Garn just smiled. He goes, oh, look, come on, guys. We need a bit of common sense here. That's all. Ridiculous.
Yeah, it's not like she was storing Teresa Halbach's DNA at her workstation or anything, right?
Correct.
Well,
Correct.
as a matter of fact, she was.
Yes. Cherie Cohen actually kept all the swabs at her bench in a cupboard. And also, she extracted Teresa Halbach's DNA at the same time that she was doing Ida-Mafel. So if she can contaminate one sample, she can easily cross-contaminate another. That's why the experiment had to be tossed out and done again. They're not my rules. They're the Wisconsin State Crime Lab rules, written in black and white. All right, guys. We've done well over 2 hours. We've done extremely well. Do we have any final comments? Jack 61.
Thanks to everybody that's participated in making these podcasts. I'm a late comer to the group and to Foul Play, but obviously, as everyone knows, I've been involved in this since the series aired. So much thanks to you and everyone involved. That's it.
No, thank you, Jack 61.
I'd like to
Ruby.
thank all our guest researchers that have
Yes,
appeared with us throughout this, both seasons, and the many podcasts we made.
yes. Big Jeff.
I'd like to echo everyone's especially thanks to everyone, the panel, the guest researchers, especially you, Dr. Silkman, for your tireless effort in putting together all the presentations. It really has added a lot, I think, to the awareness of the community. And I'd also like to thank everyone who has taken the time and effort to do a FOIA, and everybody who's in the process of doing a FOIA to raise awareness. All the people
Yes.
who put together, got us the CASO report in the first place, Skip Top, and anybody who contributed to that. Really, we are in a lot of ways standing on the shoulders of giants, and
Yes, we are.
let's recognize those giants.
Yes.
Thank you very
yes,
much.
we are.
And you're one of them too, Dr. Silkman. Thank you.
No, I've only done a small little part. And Neverly.
Yeah, small little part, Dr. Silkman. All right, if you want to call it that way. I beg to differ. Yeah, I just wanted to acknowledge all our loyal supporters. Thank you so
Yes.
much for coming at any given time, day, time zone, and whatnot. No matter what's going on, you're here, and without you, we do actually do it for you. So
We
thank
do.
you very much.
We do. Zoe, do you have a comment?
Well, I just wanted to say everything that Big Jeff and Neverly and you said, and I would really like for all the Americans to stay safe, and I really hope this
Yes.
situation calms down, and that everybody just stays safe and is okay after what's going on right now.
Yes. Correct. Yep, for sure. Well, look, guys, I'd like to thank our listening audience for coming along. And if you like what we do, please subscribe, give a thumbs up if you like what we do. And also, I'd like to thank my panel and all the guests. And it's not only just Foul Play, it's other researchers, it's other YouTubers as well that are spreading the good word. I felt that doing MaM 1 and MaM 2 in the way that we've done it, in the manner that we've done it, disseminates a lot of information, and really now just use it as a launching pad if you like a particular aspect of the case, to go on it and read and learn, and maybe come back and we can do a podcast together. The whole idea is to share and to gain more knowledge and to keep the case alive, because what we find here is not only just applicable to Stephen or Brendan, it's applicable to thousands of cases out there. It's just an absolute nightmare. So I'd just like to say, look, thank you very much, guys. It's been a pleasure to have done this series. What I like to do is probably take a week or so off just to relax and get a bit more energy, and then we'll come back and we'll hit with Brendan Dassey. I promise you, we're not going to leave him out in the cold or the dark. Go back, season 2 of MaM, and we'll look at it from Brendan's perspective, and give it the respect that it needs. We have to keep that in mind. All right, guys, thank you very much. All the very best.
Bye. This has been a Foul Play production.